associated with your university account. So say if you're using library services, that sort of thing, it'd be the same login information. If you do not know your U2 ID or password, please email the help desk with the following information: your full name, program, and an alternative UFT email. You can also email your business officer to get this information as well. I'm just going to log into Elentra now and show you what that process looks like. So when I log into Elentra, again, I'm putting in my U2 ID and password. This will be the interface that I see as a learner for you guys, for program admins and program directors, and I believe competence committee chairs. This is the view that you'll first see when logging in. So I'm just going to blow it up a bit. So you'll be in your tasks and results dashboard, which basically just shows you if you've completed any tasks. If you're a program admin, this might not be the case. But if you've completed any assessment tests, and they'll show up immediately on your dashboard. These are ones that are actually in progress. The completed tasks are over here. But this is the primary view that you'll have as a program director. And you'll see at the top, there's the tasks and results. You have an option to start an assessment. If you're a program admin that has more than one program associated with your role, which is fairly rare, but if it is the case, you'll see more than one program listed here, and you could just toggle between them. And then you'll be able to access reports and that sort of thing under the admin tab for assessment and evaluation. So this is just kind of like a brief overview of the start point once you log into Elentra. I'm first going to show you how it looks like, basically the user functionality from a learner's perspective. I think it just helps to understand, you know, how residents are navigating and using the system, and you might get a lot of questions from especially if you're a program admin, from learners about how to use the system, and it would just probably make it a lot more easily if you knew what they saw. So I'm a learner right now. I see this main dashboard, which basically lists all of my EPAs, and it's divided by stage. So as you know, there are 4 stages in the competence by design model. And on this main dashboard, which you'll have access to as well as a program admin, and I'll show you how to do that in a bit. You'll have all of the EPAs that are associated with each stage listed below. So a learner can see all of the EPAs that are expected of them. We don't currently have targets populated in the system yet, but the long-term vision is that you'd have a little bar here that would indicate how many entrustments you have and how many are outstanding. Right now, in order for a learner to see that kind of summary view, they'd have to click on this little downward arrow, which should show all of the assessment tools that are associated with this EPA, and an aggregate view of the overall entrustment rating for all of the completed assessments. So for here, you'll see I have 2 assessments total on this assessment tool for EPA Foundations of Discipline 1. And one of those assessments was given an overall rating of support, and the other was given an overall rating of autonomy. So this is a nice at a glance view that residents and program admins have access to, just to see how they're progressing along in certain EPAs. So if I want to see the assessment data in a little bit more detail, I have a few options at my disposal as a learner. So I can either go into the assessments tab and view individual assessments as little tiles, and then choose to click into them to see the expanded view of the form. And there's all sorts of filtering options, which I'll show you in a moment. Or I can choose to click this link right here, which gives me an aggregate summary of this particular form for this particular EPA. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this. And you'll see I've completed, I mentioned before, I completed 2 assessments. It'll give me a summary. So right now we're looking at the demographic variables. You'll see all of the options that were selected for these 2 assessments. So for one of the assessments, it was university appointed faculty. For another, it was a clinical associate, et cetera, et cetera. And what I think this, what I think the summary view is really good for is for learners to track how many, if you have contextual variable targets for an EPA, it can help to track how many for each contextual variable they've completed. And it also serves to summarize or aggregate the comments on a particular EPA. So if they want to review everything at one point, I know psychiatry had a question about this. How do we see all of the comments aggregated? This is a good way to do it if you're looking EPA by EPA. And then lastly, you can see this view of the overall entrustment ratings over time. So I can see as a learner that I'm progressing. So my first assessment, I received a value of support, and the second assessment, I received a rating of autonomy. So it's just a good view for the learner to see how they're progressing in a given EPA. So I'll just recap a little bit. So I got there by going to the main dashboard for resident display, and then clicking on the tool here, which gives me an aggregate view. If I wanted to see all of the assessments that I've ever completed or have been completed on me, I can click this assessments tab. And so what that will do is list all, like, see, remember what I said before about how it listed in a tile format. So that's what I was referring to. I can choose to do some filtering here. So we have some filtering options. Again, if you have EPA targets, a great way for residents to track how many assessments they've completed in a given, for a given contextual variable is to use this filtering option in their assessments tab. So right now, I'll pretend I'm interested in assessments that were completed on Mount Sinai Hospital. So let's pretend I have a target that I need to get 1 assessment done at Mount Sinai. Then I'll filter, apply them. Oh, did I actually? Yeah. Yeah, perfect. And you'll see I have these assessments here that are associated with that site. So I know, okay, I have 3. My target was 1 and I have 3 completed, so I'm good. So there's, as I mentioned before, there's multiple ways to view your completed assessments, and it'll just depend on the user for what works best for them. But I'll just show you that once you have this tile view, you can actually look at the completed assessment, like the full form. So this is the assessment that was completed. This is what a completed form looks like. I have the EPA tool name at the top. I have the assessor and the assessee information with their contact info. I have all of the completed demographics. I have the completed milestones, the overall entrustment rating, and any comments that were entered. And you can also download this as a PDF. Say this was a great example of an assessment for you. You can download it and print it out. The last thing I want to show you on this tab, because it might be helpful to recommend to learners, just to monitor these 2 tabs here. So in progress and pending just show you any outstanding assessments. So you might have initiated as a learner, but the faculty just hasn't submitted it yet. So here I clicked on pending. I'm just going to close this filter because it's wonky, but you'll see that I have 1 outstanding assessment by Amy Wong. And so I know right now we don't have the reminder set, but in the future we might have the option where residents can push a reminder to faculty. But right now it just kind of provides you with that information, what the assessment method was, all of the information you need to maybe approach that faculty and get that assessment submitted. And also it just helps for residents to keep track of what's done and what's not done, because they could have thought that, you know, this EPA core of discipline 2 was already completed without actually having double checked that all of them actually went through. And so you just want to make sure that learners are monitoring this section throughout their progress and training. And then lastly, on their dashboard, I just want to show you this pins function. So this, I'm not sure how many people use it, but it really just serves to bookmark an assessment. So when you're in the assessments tab, you can choose this little pin icon. So say, for example, there was some really great critical feedback that was on this form, and I just want to remember it for later without sorting through everything again, then I can pin it and it'll show up on this tab here for later reference. And I can always unpin it and it'll be removed from that dashboard. So this is the learner view. What I'm going to do is just show you the process of starting an assessment, because I'm not sure all of you are familiar with this. So the Start Assessment button is always to the top left corner for all users. Depending on which user you are, you might have different options available to you. So I'm the learner right now, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in my assessor, who is Amy Wong. And I have these three options right now. Email blank form is something that we're getting rid of. So I'll just go through these right now. So you might not see this in the future, so I just disregard it. But complete now is essentially what ideally you want to be doing. Maybe not so much right now during the COVID pandemic. It might be safer to email an assessment to your assessor just so that you minimize contact with each other's personal devices and therefore limit exposure to COVID. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that you're using this option. We just see the greatest completion rates are for assessments that are done in that point in time. The complete and confirm via email is a function where the resident typically initiates an assessment and they're expected to fill out all of the demographic fields before emailing to the assessor to complete the remaining bits. Email blank form is an option that's been removed because we find that when you have a partially completed form, you have a much greater chance of getting that form submitted versus a blank form where there might not be any context. You know, maybe the assessment was completed more than a few days ago and the faculty doesn't really have anything to trigger their memory. Usually, and also it just takes longer to do because there's less fields filled out. So we see a really low completion rate on the email blank form. And so that's part of this decision to remove it for this coming academic year. I'm not sure exactly when it'll be applied with the COVID pandemic, but for sure, July 2020. And so the date of encounter, so I'm going to select that today. That's when the case happened. Your program will be defaulted. If you're part of more than one program, which might be the case in surgical foundations, where you have access to both surgical foundations program and your home specialty, then it'll be, you'll have to toggle through to the appropriate program to get those associated EPAs. But for the most of you, it'll be defaulted. You don't have to do anything. And then you'll choose the EPA that you want to get assessed on. So I'm going to choose core discipline. This button right here just allows you to filter the EPAs by your current stage that you're in. And you either have the choice to preview the form or begin the assessment. Please strongly recommend that learners, if they just want to see the form, to use this button right here. If they begin assessment, they're going to trigger an assessment record, which is possibly, you know, confusing for those who are looking at the data in the back end, or if you're pulling a report. It just creates a lot more of a mess, I guess, of the data. We prefer that, and also when we're doing our statistics on completion rates, it just kind of causes a little bit confusion. So if they want to preview, please select this. For the purpose of the demo, I'm just going to begin. And this is the form that I showed you before. So this is the same as the completed form where you have the EPA tool name, the assessor and assessee information. You have all of the contextual variables. So if you recall when I showed you the form before, there's 3 different sections. There's the demographic sections. I'm just going to scroll through and show you. There's the milestone assessment ratings. There's the overall entrustment rating. And there's the comments. So I'm just going to click through here. It's important to note that the rotation service and site are auto-populated based on your last completed assessment. That just saves people a click. This is a multi-select contextual variable. So on your phone, you can easily just select one or more. But if you're on your desktop, you'll actually have to click and then press Control to click another option. So just something to note if you're using a desktop computer. I'm just going to go ahead and give myself these ratings. And then just note that there's no force on this. Faculty can technically either press no rating or not fill it out at all. We didn't put a force on the milestones. The only thing that has a force is the contextual variables and the overall rating scale. So if I didn't fill that out, I'd get a warning. And at this point, I can either submit, and I have to submit in order for the assessment to be completed, or let's say I only completed part of it. I could choose to save as draft and email a link to the assessor. So that's, for example, if the assessor got called away on an emergency page, you can use this option, but I'm going to press submit. And then you'll see that assessment immediately goes into my dashboard. And again, I can see an aggregate view by clicking on the tool. So this is the functionality for learners. I'm going to dip into the program administrator or program director view, which I started with initially. So I just showed you the learner's view. I can actually see that view too as a program admin or program director. And I do that by clicking on the My Learners tab. So the My Learners tab will show you all of the learners in your program. You'll be able to sort through it with these sticky tabs here. So if I want to see PGY 4s and 5s, it'll narrow down my search for me. Or I can choose to search for the learner here. So I'm just going to search for me. So you'll see this tab pop out, and then I can choose to look at either the CBME dashboard, which is where you saw the stages and list of EPAs, or the assessments tab, which is where you saw the little tile, assessment tiles, and I was able to sort. I'm going to go into the CBME dashboard just to show you that it brings me directly to their view. So I can see what they're seeing. I'm going to go back. So again, that's a way for you to track individual learners if you have like maybe questions, or if they come to you with a question about their dashboards, and you can kind of get a better sense of what the issue is. So I'll go back here, sorry. So that's where you can see your learner's dashboard, do a little bit of tracking. Again, if you're not completing assessments as a program admin, you won't see assessments here unless you're doing it on behalf of faculty, which I know some program admins might be doing. But if you do complete assessments, they'll be listed here, and you can view them in more detail. So we always give you the option to view the form in full. So you can view completed assessments here and anything outstanding on this dashboard here. So I'm going to move into the critical tasks that program administrators and maybe program directors have. So the first one of those is making sure that you check off when a stage is completed. So this would be following a competence committee meeting. You would check off whether a stage has been completed via the resident CBME dashboard. So I'm just going to go back to Lisa, the learner, I'm going to go into their CPME dashboard and show you what that process looks like. So these are my 4 stages. This is my learner, Lisa, in neonatal perinatal medicine. And she's already completed transition of discipline. We had a meeting in September 2019, and we reviewed all of her EPAs, and she was good. So I signed her off. But now the competence committee meeting has just met about foundations of discipline. Again, we reviewed all of her EPAs and agreed to sign her off. So as a program admin, following a competence committee meeting, it would be your role to check off that a stage has been completed. And you'd have to do this for each of the applicable learners. And this is very critical in Elentra because this determines how your reports show up. So we have some reports she'll show you in a second that are, stage progress summaries. And if a learner is in the wrong stage in Elentra, then it might just show up a little bit wonky. And we definitely don't want you to have that issue. And so this is an important task that program admins have to make sure they're doing. So I'm just going to show you in order to sign off a stage. I click that circle. I'm asked to give a reason. It's optional, but for my tracking, let's just say, okay, I had a competence committee meeting March 30th, pass FOD. And you'll see that the check mark has changed. And that change will be registered throughout the system and will affect multiple functions in the back end. If I made a mistake, I can click that circle again. This time I need a reason to indicate why I'm removing it. Oops, wrong resident. And then it'll remove that check mark for me. So just remember that's something that you have to make sure you're doing, whereas being delegated to someone with admin access. The other thing I want to show you are the reports. So we have some stock reports in Elentra for regular tracking. So I'm going to go to assessment and evaluation. So if you go to reports here, you'll see a list of stock reports. So there's the assessment data extract, essentially a raw data extract of every assessment data record that's ever been completed on any of your learners. We're looking to add some filtering options to this raw data extract, just so that it's a little bit more manageable to look through. But right now, we just have a few options here, like you can choose to or not to include the milestone data. And then again, if you have access to more than one program, then you would just select the relevant one here. And this downloads for all of the residents in your program, and it downloads as an Excel file. So I'll just kind of show you what that looks like. Okay. So this is the raw data extract. Some programs use this for their own reporting. So anesthesia, for example, has dedicated analytics staff where they can do their own more detailed analysis or just looking at different things that we're not looking at in Elentra. And this just provides you with that raw data if you had the resources or capabilities to do that. But all of the data is here, even whether, the device was done on a desktop, etc. So there's a lot of information here. I removed the milestones, so I'm only given the entrustment ratings here. I don't actually have the milestone assessment criteria, but you'll see there's the stages, the EPAs associated with it. Everything is in this data extract. That's one of the options for reporting in Elentra. The other options is you can see like a record of all of the deleted assessments, if that's something you wanted to look at. Embargo reports just gives you, we have 2 assessments right now for all programs that are embargoed, and that's the professional behavioral monitoring form, which is like a professionalism incident report. And we have the note to file assessment, which can either be a positive or a negative note on a resident's file. And so these are embargoed, meaning that the resident does not see them. Everything else, all the other assessments completed in Elentra are real time. And so residents receive completed assessment records immediately. But the embargo reports do not show up in learners' dashboards. And the program director sent an alert, and they can decide what to do with those assessments, whether they do want to share them to residents, for example, if it's a positive comment, or what have you. The EPA progress report I'll show you. And again, I'm just going to have to select the date range. And here I actually get the choice to, this report is by learner. So I'm just going to choose me because I know there's assessments. If you selected more than one learner, you'd get this zip folder where you'd have a file for each learner, and it would just kind of be listed down here. It says the name, which is convenient. And so if I click into this file, I will see a summary, so it'll tell me what my stage is. So this is what I was talking about before. Remember, I just switched it to Foundations of Discipline. If I hadn't have made that switch, this report would have had the wrong information. So that's just another reason why it's important to make that switch. Shows me when the report was created, so today's date range, and then it lists all of the EPAs that have been completed. So right now it's aggregated. So core of discipline, all the assessments that I completed are aggregated here. You see I completed 2. I was interested in both. And if we don't have target numbers populated here, that's something you'd have to add to the report. But it should aggregate the university appointed faculty and then again aggregate comments too. So this is another way where you can see aggregated comments for all EPAs. But if I had parts, right now it's not dividing the EPA into parts. So some EPAs, as some of you might know, require from the Royal College Specialty Committee that more than one assessment be used to assess that EPA. Right now, the system just aggregates all of those assessments for that EPA, but in the future, we'd like to parse that out. And so that's something that's on the backlog for discovery comments, so to be determined when that's going to be released. The name of the EPA, so this is a nifty feature. So the reports are kind of a little bit interactive in the sense that you can click the link and it'll take you directly into Elentra. Well, I was on my private browser, so I'm going to have to close everything, which would close the Zoom. So I'm not going to show you, but you can click on the link. It'll take you directly to the assessments tab, and you'll see all of the contributing assessments that make up this field here. So I encourage you to look at these reports on your own. Like some others are the stage progress report I told you before, which is similar to the EPA progress report, but just groups it by competency stage. There's the other mandatory assessments. If you have any other non-EPA forms in Elentra, it'll aggregate those assessments here. And then flagged reports, we set flags by default on, I think it's assessments that have a rating of 3 or below. But of course, we're in the, it's kind of a feedback model where residents are expected to get lower scores in the beginning. So maybe this won't be as helpful, but it's here. So I encourage you to look through those on your own time and let us know if you have any questions about those. This is the assessment test here. Just allows you to see all of the assessments that are outstanding in your program, which is a useful feature. So we were supposed to make the change in spring, not quite sure when it's going to happen because of the COVID pandemic now, but it is the plan to set an assessment expiry so that from the point of initiation, you'll have, or the faculty will have 7 days to complete it, after which the assessment task will be expired. These tasks we still have a record of and can always be reactivated, like the timer reset. But it's just for the purpose of making sure that the assessments completed are accurate and true to the performance of the resident. There's literature out there that says after 48 hours, the validity of an assessment rapidly decreases. And also we've seen assessments just hanging on for months and months and never getting completed. And we want to make sure we're not clogging up resident faculty dashboards with all of these assessments that may or may not get completed. So there will be an assessment expiry to come, but not quite sure on the date yet. But regardless, you can see the outstanding assessments here. There is the option for you to send out reminders. So I can send a reminder to a faculty. So I know Amy Wong meant to complete this. I'm just going to trigger a reminder to her and she'll get an email. So this is just not an option if you have the capability to kind of monitor what's outstanding. And a potential use case for that is, say a learner tells you that she's been initiating a lot of assessments with Amy, but they don't seem to be going through. She could go through this dashboard and see like, oh yes, I verify that Amy does have some assessments outstanding. I can agree to push those reminders type thing. Okay, I realize this is a lot of information. So I'm very sympathetic to the fact that you might not recall this, you know, right after the session, but we do have detailed user guides. So I think this just serves as, you know, like a foundation for you to get a sense of how to navigate. And then I think the real work will happen when you sit down with the user guide and just kind of go through Elentra itself. And I don't think, as soon as you get the hang of where everything lives, like I don't think it's actually too challenging to use. The last thing I want to show you, which might be more relevant in some programs than others, is this groups function. So what a group is in Elentra is essentially giving a faculty or group of faculty the ability to get access to residents' dashboards. So a use case for this would be, for example, an academic advisor. So if I'm an academic advisor, I have a resident that I regularly meet with and monitor their progress more closely. Maybe it would be appropriate to see their completed EPA assessments so I can better track their progress. So, you know, for that case, we wouldn't want faculty to be given admin access and have access to all residents. And so we create these groups so that they just have access to the one person. And I'll show you how to do that right now. And again, you probably won't remember this, but there's the user guide, and I'm hoping that the demonstration just helps a little bit. But essentially you go to this button, press add groups. You would name your group. So I'm creating one group, so I'm going to put one here. And now the group has been created. And if I go into it, I can choose which faculty I want in this group. So I'm going to choose Amy. Amy is my guinea pig right now. And then I would have to select tutor. I know the nomenclature doesn't quite make sense. What is a tutor? But it's how we program groups in Elentra. So I'd select tutor. And then I can actually search the residents. So if Amy Wong is an academic advisor to Lisa, then I can create a group. I can add her. I can add more than one resident, but just for this demonstration, I'll just add her, me, and proceed. And now there's a group. And now Amy can see my learner dashboard if they want. So that's a nifty function. Another function which you have access to is this resources tab. So essentially, I'm just gonna see if I can, I'm gonna show you where this resource lives. So if I go into a learner's dashboard. I'm just showing you if I were to upload a resource, and typically what we see being uploaded is the learner schedule, which essentially maps out all of the EPA completion expectations for a given learner or stage, then I can hyperlink that here. And so you have the opportunity to hyperlink a resource for each of the stages. It could be different for each stage. And then, so what I was showing you here, this resources tab is actually where you do that. So I can put a label, I'll just say, and I'm just going to do this. So say you had a website, say Department of Medicine wanted to actually put their website to link to all of their URLs, and they could do that here. Okay, so it's been updated, and I'll just show you that that change was made. So you'll see the hyperlink here. So it's just a great way for you to hyperlink really important documents that residents can have easy access to while they're in Elentra. And again, we recommend it's the learner schedule because that shows all of the EPA expectations, the targets, and everything for your program. But you can choose to hyperlink something else. I'll go back here. So again, that's under the programs tab, under resources. Yeah, I believe that is all for the Elentra demo. I am going to pause for 5 minutes if you have questions on this, on the Elentra demo that I just provided. Just 5 minutes though, and then we're going to save the rest of the questions to the end, but I realize there's a big chunk of information. I hope you guys can still hear me. If someone can confirm, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm gonna continue on to the, I'm gonna continue on to the presentation then. Oh, I see some chat. Okay, great, thank you. So this is just to show you whenever an assessment is completed, I mean, it depends what the assessment method is, but generally you'll see the assessor will receive an email just notifying them that the assessment was completed in Elentra, and you'll get this email from our help desk. And it'll have a link to the assessment. So if I'm an assessor, I complete an assessment on a learner, I'll receive a confirmation email saying, hey, look, like an assessment was completed for this learner. I'll have a link to that. It kind of serves as a little bit of a safeguard to make sure that residents aren't just completing assessments on themselves, because an email will be triggered to the assessor that they select. And if I want to click into this link, it's the same thing if I get sent an incomplete assessment that I haven't yet submitted. If I click on the link, I actually don't have to log into the system. We didn't want to create a barrier for faculty to access Elentra and complete assessments. And so we understand that not all faculty will remember their UTRID and password. And so this email system just serves as a safeguard for them to be able to still complete email-based assessments without actually having to log in. So the assessment plan, I showed you some of the reporting features that we have in Elentra at the moment. We will eventually, remember that My Learners tab where you saw the learners and you can go into their dashboard. Eventually that dashboard will be replaced with a nice, beautiful, colorful view of all residents' EPA progress. So there'll be coding of EPA and any contextual variable target. So you'll actually see a visual indication of whether the EPA targets have been successfully achieved or not. It'll be a nice at a glance view. You'll also be able to cut and splice the data in multiple ways and just visualize it differently. And this will be real time. So right now we have Tableau. Tableau is our primary reporting software for competence committees. But we expect that the assessment plan will replace a lot of the dashboards that are currently produced in Tableau, and possibly free up the Tableau team to do more like program evaluation, analytics, and that sort of thing. We're anticipating that the assessment plan will be launched in late summer, early fall of the 2020-21 academic year. I'm just going to show you some screenshots. I apologize as I realize they're a little bit blurry, but this is an example. I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but where you first go into the My Learners tab, you see all of your residents, as opposed to all of the small tabs with not much information in the original view I showed you. Now you have them all listed here. You can still see that there's a dashboard and assessments button if you want to go into their specific profile. But without even having to do that, you have all of the EPAs listed horizontally, and they're color coded in terms of their level of achievement. So if I'm looking at Amani Norman, I see that he has, for D1, which is Transition to Discipline 1, he has completed 5 assessments and achieved 3 out of 3 of the targets for that assessment. And so he has a color scale of green, and the same is for D2, D3. He achieved 7 assessments. He achieved the targets at the bottom. For F1 of Norman, you'll see that he's making some progress. He's done quite a bit of assessments, but he hasn't quite met the target. So he has 10 assessments, but only 5 of the 8 targets set for that EPA have been completed. But that's still over 50%, and so that's why it's colored blue. So this is just a nice visual indication to see how a resident is progressing along in their EPAs, and also to do a little bit of a comparator between residents. I'm going to move forward. And so if I wanted to view, so if you see here at the top, I'm just going to flip back, there's these 3 tabs. So one is assessment by EPA stage completion program stats. So we're looking at it by EPA right now, but if I want to see it by stage completion, I can view it that way as well. So it's a little bit more of a higher at a glance view. So I would say, okay, there's 3 EPAs in transition to discipline, and Norman, he's stellar. He's achieved 3 of those EPA requirements. And so he's good. We can mark him off as done, transition to discipline. And that little check mark, which indicates approve, is essentially the competence committee confirmation of him having successfully achieved that EPA. You would say, okay, well, if he met all of his targets and he has, a green good to go color on the EPA dashboard, then why can't I just click off the little rating to say it's done and approved? Well, it might be the case that he chose very simple cases. It might be the case that he was always choosing the same assessor, and that assessor is known to be generous in their ratings. And so the competence committee is where the program actually looks at that data in a little bit more detail and just verifies that the resident doesn't have to do any more assessments in that EPA. So this is a nice little bar, which again offers a little bit more of a comparator between residents. So it's number of assessments on the y-axis and then residents on the x-axis. And it's showing you of the total number of assessments, how many have been achieved. So achieved meaning their targets, being entrusted, all that sort of thing. And then so we can see there's a little bit of variability in the achievement rates for a given EPA. So I'm just showing you that there, again, as I mentioned before, there's a little bit of options in terms of how you cut and splice the data. There's filtering tabs at the top. If you want to limit the search or scope of the residents that you see below. There's actually a lot of other views as well, like resident specific views that show their individual progress, etc. But these are just screenshots. This isn't like a working mock-up, but there'll be more to come in the future. I'm going to pass it over to Nima now. Now that I discussed the reporting in Elentra, Nima's just going to go over reporting in Tableau and what that looks like. And then again, we'll have question and answers at the end.
Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So hi everyone, I'm just gonna go through the Tableau dashboards and explain to you what kind of information you can find on the dashboards. So all the data that we use for the Tableau dashboards comes from from Elentra. It's what Lisa showed you, the assessment raw data extract. So we get the extract and then we do some cleaning and do some coding in Tableau based off of the entrustment and contextual variable targets provided by the program. So we can provide these dashboards for your competence committee meetings, but we highly recommend that you give your competence committee meeting dates well in advance so that we can ensure and schedule that the dashboards to be created in advance of your meetings. So first off, there are two different views on the Tableau dashboard. There's the cohort overview, and then there's the trainee overview. The cohort overview gives you an overview of the performance of all trainees in your cohort of your program, and it allows you to sort of compare the performance of trainees to their peers. The trainee overview is a more detailed overview of a specific trainee's performance. So to start off, you're gonna first see this chart on the cohort overview. Here, it's going to list the trainees' names on the left and the EPAs at the top. So the green cells here indicates that the trainee has achieved the contextual variable and entrustment targets. If it's yellow, it just means that the trainee is in progress of completing them. And if the cell is blank, that means that trainee has not yet completed any EPAs for that, assessments for that EPA. To the right, there's this reference section over here, and it tells you, you can filter for the particular EPA that you want to see the targets for. So it just tells you what the observation targets are, entrustment targets are, and if there's any contextual variable targets for that EPA. Also, if you've noticed that when I hover over the cell, there's this tooltip that shows up, and it has the assessee's name, full name on it, the EPA code and title, and it also sort of gives you more details as to why the trainee hasn't met the targets yet. So it just tells you, like here, you can see that the contextual variable targets are achieved for this particular trainee, but the entrustment targets are not achieved. So another thing to note about this dashboard is that if trainees do not complete any EPAs at all, their names will actually not appear here, but we do create a note right under the table that just kind of lists all the trainees that have not completed any EPAs, and that's for your reference. And another important thing to note about this dashboard is that for this section of the dashboard is that the fact that PGME guideline that greater than 50% of entrustments achieved should be assessed by a university appointed faculty, that's not actually coded in this dashboard, this section of the dashboard. But if you move on to the bar graph below, you can actually visualize that information there. So on this dashboard, the horizontal axis, again, just lists the assessee's full name. The vertical axis is the number of assessments. The gray bar refers to the number of assessments completed by the trainee. The dark blue bar is the number of entrustments. And then the light blue bar is the number of assessments entrusted by faculty. So for assessee number 133 of the assessments are completed by this trainee. 86 of those were entrusted, and 86 of the entrusted assessments, 68 of them were actually entrusted by faculty. So clearly this trainee has greater than 50% of their assessments entrusted by faculty. So to the right of the bar graphs, you can see that there are some filters. So this is just another a way of just filtering out the data. So you can filter it by stage of residency, by EPA code to see data for a specific EPA, for type of assessor, or you can even filter the data for a specific date range. So now to move on to the next part of the dashboard. Again, this was the trainee overview. So again, this is just a more detailed view, and all the information here displayed on this dashboard is all for one particular trainee. So at the top, you have a filter here. So it lists all the trainees' names, and you can filter for any particular trainee that you'd like. And then next, there's this chart that's very similar to the cohort overview chart. Again, it just indicates whether the trainee has achieved the targets for the particular EPA. And again, similarly to the cohort overview, we have a reference table at the side so that you can check what the contextual variable targets or entrustment targets are. So under that chart, there's another table here, and this table is kind of another way of visualizing the information, all the information we just saw, the information from the tooltip, the information from the chart, as well as the reference table. So first here, it lists the EPA codes. So all the EPA assessments that the trainee has completed, the EPA title of the assessment, and then we have the observation target. So whatever the target is set at by the program. And then we have the number of observations that the trainee has achieved for that particular EPA. And then next you have the entrustment target. So here it's 2. Again, that's set by the program. And this trainee has achieved 2 entrustments. And then we have the number of assessments for that EPA that have been entrusted by faculty, and then whether or not their contextual variable targets have been achieved. So if everything is achieved, then you'll have everything will be green if all the targets are met. And if in any cases the targets have not been met, then they will be highlighted yellow. So under that table, we then have 2 bar graphs. So these bar graphs are a way to visualize the number of assessments completed for various response options of a particular contextual variable. So for the dashboards, the contextual variables used here are the type of case procedure and patient demographic. These contextual variables can be customized as per the program's request. So you can pick which contextual variables you think are most important for you to visualize for your program, and you can let us know, and we can ensure that those contextual variables are displayed for in these bar graphs. And right under, we have a sparkline graph. The sparkline graph is a great way to actually visualize the learning curve of the trainee. So in this, for this assessee too, in the beginning of the academic session, you can see that they had more direction and support ratings versus at the end of the academic session, they had more entrustment scores. So you can see that the trainee has improved over time. So it's a great way of just visualizing the growth of the trainee over the academic session. And for these 3 graphs over here, so the 2 bar graphs and the sparkline graph, you can also visualize the data by a particular EPA by filtering for a specific EPA. And then under that, we have another table, which is more so to see what the comments are. It first starts off with the EPA code, and then you have the date of encounter, and then the strengths and the areas, actions or areas for improvement comments for each assessment. Then you have 2 contextual variables and what the response options were for those particular assessments. So again, this is another thing that can be customized. If you just let us know what contextual variables you want to see here, we can change that as per your request. And then lastly, we have the overall rating. So you can kind of just see what the comments are for any assessments that you want, like maybe that got support or whatnot. So that kind of concludes the demonstration for Tableau. The data is actually, like the assessment plan data is real time, whereas the data for the dashboards, there's actually a little bit of lag. There's like 1 to 2 week lag in data. So, and just as a reminder, if you provide your competency committee meeting dates in advance, we can actually try to schedule to reduce that lag as much as possible. Yep. Does anyone have any questions?
We'll open it up to, thank you, Nima. We'll open it up to questions just generally. If you have any questions about Elentra or Tableau, please do let us know. I'm also monitoring the chat. Yeah, so Amy just said you can ask questions in the chat and she's monitoring it as well. I do want to let you know that the session is being recorded. I think I missed the first 5 minutes, which were just introductions anyways, but everything else has been recorded. So we'll make sure to send you the link afterwards, as well as all of the user guides, etc. So we're not getting any questions. We'll wait a few more seconds in case people are just trying to get their mics to work or something. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat either, so I guess we'll wrap up. And again, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me babble for more than an hour. And yeah, thank you so much. Take care, guys, and be safe.
Thanks, guys.